Ange.
Thanks, DJ. Hi, everyone. My name's Ange Matheson. I'm dialing into you today from New South Wales Ministry of Health. Also with me is Liz Kelly. You can probably see her in the Zoom meeting, but due to a bit of a technical snafu, I'm dialing in today. So sorry that I'm not there in video form. I wanted to start by acknowledging that wherever we are today, we're all dialing in from Aboriginal land. I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and also to any Aboriginal people who might be on the line today. Thank you everyone who's dialed into this webinar today. We really appreciate your time. And thanks also to NADA, particularly to Susie and DJ for helping to make this webinar happen today as well. So we're here to talk to you about the Take Home Naloxone program and what that means for the NGO sector. DJ, can we go to slide 2, please? Before I launch into talking about the Take Home Naloxone program though, I just wanted to quickly revisit what naloxone is for those who aren't so familiar with this medicine. So naloxone is an opioid antagonist, and this means it acts to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. So it's really, really useful in an overdose situation. In Australia, naloxone is on Schedule 3, much like Ventolin. So traditionally that's just been available on prescription and over the counter from pharmacies. Unlike Ventolin though, we've found that most doctors haven't actually been prescribing naloxone to patients, and also a lot of pharmacies haven't been stocking the medication either. We know the World Health Organization and also Australia's National Drug Strategy have been recommending that naloxone be made more available to people in the community who are likely to either experience an overdose or witness an overdose. And there's been a lot of work going on in New South Wales to make that happen. So in New South Wales, we've had researchers and clinicians like the team at Southeastern Sydney Local Health District led by Professor Nick Linzeris, who's been working up different models of a take-home naloxone program that could be really workable. As well, peers, non-gov organisations and New South Wales Health have all been kind of working towards this goal for quite some time. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the take-home naloxone program that we've developed for New South Wales. There's been some complexities, I suppose, in the development, and mainly that's because naloxone is a pharmaceutical medication. It's on Schedule 3, so it's pretty tightly controlled in Australia and in New South Wales. So what we've had to do is work around and through those regulatory restrictions, I suppose. So the Take Home Naloxone program involves identifying the kinds of workers who've got the skills to talk to clients about naloxone and provide an education intervention to them, and then training and credentialing those people so that they're able to supply naloxone, and then also legally enabling those workers to do that legally. Along with that, we've had to provide a system by which the naloxone can be supplied for free to clients. So in the case of NGOs, this means also making sure that the NGOs can access the naloxone for free. So this intervention's been a long time in development. I guess we've trialled it in 6 local health districts as well as the medically supervised injecting centre over the last couple of years. And then over the last 6 months, we've been rolling that out to all of our local health districts and to justice health settings as well. So we just needed a little bit more time before we could extend that to the NGO sector. And that's mainly because NGOs don't often have a pharmacy department on site. So it just kind of changes the regulations we need to work through. Next slide, please, DJ. So just show and tell, the program, the Take Home Naloxone program we're doing in New South Wales, focuses on the 2 formulations of naloxone that are easiest for members of the public to administer. So we've used naloxone intranasal spray, pretty new product, and pre-Noxad pre-filled syringes, been around for a bit longer. Ampules of naloxone are a bit more technical to use, particularly in a stressful overdose situation, so we're not including them in our program. Next slide, please. This is just to show you some of the resources that we've produced for consumers. This one is a consumer information sheet about the Nixoid intranasal product, and it's just designed to be a little bit easier to read than the consumer medicine information that comes in the medicine itself. Next slide, please. This is the version for the intranasal option. Now we know that we need to do lower literacy versions of these, and we also need to translate them. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has gotten in the way of us doing this financial year, but it remains a priority for us. Slide 7, please. I just thought I'd quickly tell you about a national take-home naloxone pilot that's also happening. So the New South Wales program is kind of happening at the same time as the national naloxone pilot. What this really means is that in New South Wales, we're just taking advantage of the funding for product that the Commonwealth Government has put up for the next year or so, and we are making naloxone available for free by using that Commonwealth funded product. So the Australian pilot has similar goals to us. It's also trying to get naloxone out to people at risk of overdose or at risk of witnessing an overdose. But the Australian pilot is in 3 states for starters, and also it's looking at a broader range of settings. So it's also getting naloxone out through community pharmacies and hospitals, as well as through public health services and NGO settings. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for NGOs? Okay, so for starters, the Commonwealth Government has a Section 100 special arrangement, they call it. Essentially, this is a legal instrument that sets out the agreement between the Australian Government and the states. It dictates that they are providing products for free in certain states, but it also dictates that those states need to report in a certain way back to the Australian Government so that they can do their evaluation. In New South Wales, we've recently just got a new legal authority signed off by our Chief Health Officer, and that enables specific kinds of health and welfare workers in NGO settings to be legally allowed to supply naloxone. So, you know, usually it's just prescribers and pharmacists that are legally allowed to hand over this medicine. So we've put this in place so that all of the people that we want to train in NGOs are legally allowed to supply the stuff. So I'll get Liz to talk you through the details in a moment, but essentially we want NGOs to sign up to the program. Then we will help to get your workers trained and credentialed so that they can legally supply naloxone. Your workers can then start delivering 10 to 15 minute brief interventions to relevant clients and supply them with naloxone. And you'll be able to access that naloxone for free to then hand on to your clients for free. The details about how the naloxone gets to your NGO for free are still being hammered out, and we're doing that in the background at New South Wales Health. Next slide, please. Okay, so who can participate? Non-government organisations such as members of NADA. We're also opening it up to private organisations, so, you know, private rehabs, for example, could also sign up. The NGO will need to sign up to a particular online portal, and that's where you enter data about how many boxes of naloxone you've handed out and a bit of detail about who you've supplied that to. There'll be free training and credentialing provided. We've recently signed up a registered training organisation to do this. They were going to do some lovely face-to-face training, but now that we are working within the restrictions of COVID-19, that's going to be delivered online. The registered NGOs are then able to obtain naloxone. As I said, the cost of the product and delivery to your door will be reimbursed or somehow covered. And then your workers can be providing naloxone following the procedures and entering the data about those interventions into the online portal. And lastly from me, just a little update about the various things that have been impacted by COVID-19 that you might be concerned about. As I said, training is now being delivered remotely, and we've been working with the training organisation on the technology for that, and we'll work with NADA to sort of go through that online program, and NADA can help us to be sure that that's going to be workable for your services and suitable. Look, we also know that the NGO sector has been impacted. Maybe you're not able to deliver the services in the way that you usually do, or you might have less staff available. So we recognise that. We realise that some of the timelines will shift a bit, but we still wanted to talk to you immediately because there may be staff who are available now and are actually, have some capacities to do some training at the moment if they're not delivering their usual services. I guess in the background, we've also been looking at all of the different ways we can be helping to get naloxone out to community members who need it. So we've been talking to the wholesalers of naloxone products. There's been a bit of a run on a lot of products in Australia at the moment. So we're working with the importers and the wholesalers to get that supply out across New South Wales as equitably as possible. We're also focusing on opioid treatment program clients generally and looking at ways that we can make sure we're getting naloxone to people who are on that program. So there's a lot of work that's going on, obviously, on naloxone in light of COVID-19. That's all from me. I might hand over now to Liz Kelly, who's been doing a whole lot of work on making the Take Home Naloxone program workable for the NGO sector, and she can talk you through the practical process. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Ange. So can we get the next slide, DJ? Oh, COVID-19. Ange, did you just want to briefly speak about COVID-19 as well?
Yes, did you not catch me? I did that bit at the end.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, great.
I might have said next slide too few times.
Great.
Over to you, Liz.
So basically, NGOs and private services can become registered orphan sites by completing and submitting an expression of interest form, which is currently available on the New South Wales Health website. And once we receive those forms, we'll sort of assess the expressions of interest, and if services meet the eligibility criteria, then we're asking services to nominate a responsible person who will essentially take accountability for the program in the service, ultimate accountability, and ensure that the orphan procedures are complied with, and to also sign a letter of agreement to comply with the procedures. And a template of that letter of agreement is also available on the New South Wales Health website. We'll give you the link to that in a moment. But we also need to publish and maintain a list of registered orphan sites on the website as well. Next slide, please. So I guess a bit more about what's involved with the training and credentialing. The training is scheduled to be delivered by a registered training organisation starting from May onwards. Health and welfare workers will need to complete a assessment, two assessments, one which is like a theory-based assessment of their knowledge and which is just a questionnaire, and then a role play skills-based assessment about delivering a brief intervention about responding to overdose and administering naloxone. So once workers have successfully completed those assessments, that means that they're credentialed to supply naloxone within their services. And the responsible person within the service needs to keep a record, needs to sort of keep records about the supply of naloxone, which workforce are credentialed, and manage stock, manage the stock at the service as well. Next slide, please. So the training covers the signs and risk factors for opioid overdose, the pharmacology, formulations and how to administer naloxone, medication handling requirements, medico-legal requirements, and then how to actually deliver a brief intervention when supplying naloxone. And that basically includes responding to overdose, client eligibility, consent from clients, contraindications, and assessing the client's existing knowledge and attitudes about administering naloxone and giving feedback to the client about that, and then information and resources that are supplied to the client, as well as assessing the client's competence to respond to overdose and administer naloxone. And it also includes troubleshooting and responding to issues that might arise. Next slide, DJ. So sorry guys, there's a leaf blower outside. Some of the beauties of working from home, but I'll see if, I hope you can hear me okay. Let me know if you're having trouble. So client eligibility criteria. So clients need to be, are eligible if they're at risk of experiencing an opioid overdose. You can hear the leaf, I've just got a message saying you can hear the leaf blower, so my husband's actually going out to see if he can cut it out for the rest of the session. So sorry about that. I'll see if I can get his attention. You can hear it. Do you want to just bear with me for 2 minutes, and I'll see if I can just quickly run out and get my husband to try to get, it's a neighbour with the leaf blower, so.
Hey Liz, you're actually coming through loud and clear. It's fine. Okay,
good. Okay, sorry guys. That's right. So I'll just carry on. So yeah, clients are eligible if for a naloxone brief intervention and to get to receive the medication if they're at risk of experiencing an opioid overdose. So that might be someone who's using illicit or prescribed opioids, as well as at risk of witnessing an opioid overdose, such as friends or family or carers or someone who uses opioids. They also need to be able to give informed consent, which means that they need to be aged over 16 years and over, or not affected by, not severely intoxicated, or have a cognitive impairment or a psychological, physical, medical condition that impairs their ability to give informed consent. And there's also, they also need to be aware of the contraindications for naloxone, which is essentially possibility of allergic reaction, although that's a very, very rare possibility. It can happen. Next slide. So the procedures manual is an end-to-end description of the program. So it describes the registration process for services, the training and credentialing for health and welfare workers, including workforce eligibility, the governance mechanisms that need to be in place in the service, medication handling, including ordering and storing and supplying naloxone for take-home use. So the procedures apply to the supply of naloxone for later use. They don't apply to health and welfare workers actually directly administering naloxone to a client in response to an overdose that's happening within the setting. Next slide. So the information about the expression of interest, the procedures, the legal authority and the letter of agreement are all located on the New South Wales Health website, listed there, the health.nsw.gov.au/naloxone. And if you scroll down, there's a part, a heading specifically for the NGO and private providers sector. Information about the Take Home Naloxone pilot is also available at the following link, and information targeted to the community is on the Your Room website, which is yourroom.health.nsw.gov.au/naloxone. Next slide. So the other ways that naloxone can be promoted while NGOs, services and private services are waiting for training is to refer clients to community pharmacies that are providing free naloxone and are part of the pilot. A list of those community pharmacies is on the Your Room website, so that people can actually find out which community pharmacies are supplying free naloxone. And if there's a community pharmacy in your area that hasn't registered to supply, that you think there's local demand in the area for naloxone, you can encourage community pharmacies to participate. And there's some information on the Your Room website to help you do that as well. Some resources that you can order for free to supply to the community and to pharmacies. And I guess the important point is, given the COVID situation at the moment, we're really encouraging prescription supply to clients, which is still an option. So particularly high-risk clients, they should be able to go to their doctor, get a prescription and get that prescription filled at any pharmacy. And if they're on a healthcare card, that should be, I think, $6.50 or so. So it's still a really viable option where there's gaps in community pharmacies that are participating in the free supply. Next slide. So if you have any further questions that you'd like to direct to the Ministry of Health, you can email us on the email address listed, moh-naloxone@health.nsw.gov.au. Thanks very much. And I think maybe we can open the discussion to questions.
So, Liz, I'm seeing a couple of questions come up. It's Susie here from NADA.
Yeah.
One of those is around whether or not, given that a few of the alcohol and other drug services are working from home at the moment, are you able to post Take Home Naloxone to clients? Or, as you described, does that get in the way of actually having that session with them about providing information?
I think that's an issue that we're still working through at the moment. And are you able to, or Nicola?
I'm happy to take this one. Am I on mute?
No, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, thanks for that question about working from home. Look, this is something that's also been discussed by some of the services that have been delivering the Take Home Naloxone intervention for some time. So particularly at the Langton Centre, they have managed to get around the working from home restriction in some sense, in that, you know, they've been able to provide the education intervention to a client by phone. However, because naloxone is a Schedule 3 medication, you can't send it in the post. It needs to go from someone who's able to be supplying it directly to someone who's eligible to receive it, and going via the post is not really an option for that. So depending on the nature of your service, you know, if you're delivering other medications to a client, so you've got someone who's authorised to be doing home visits with medications, as is sometimes the case, then that could be worked in with that. Otherwise, I guess the option is probably to be providing information and education to a client by phone, but you'd still need to be sending them maybe to a community pharmacy to pick up their medication, just because there are those restrictions on how a Schedule 3 drug can be passed from one person to another. Let me know if that answers the question for people.
Thanks, Ange. Another question that's come through is around the obligation, as you described, where a registered service would need to have their address on a website so that the public could access it. What about those services that perhaps, because of the nature of the sensitivity of the clients that they're working with, is not able to, or is not perhaps comfortable to provide their actual address? Can you?
Yes. Sure, happy to take this one. Yeah, we've had at least one service asking about this, but I suspect there might be a couple or a few who would be in this situation. So we have a requirement to have a published list of the services that are permitted to obtain naloxone from a pharmaceutical drug wholesaler. So it's kind of a pharmaceutical services legal list, I suppose, so they know that they're allowed to supply to these people, to these organisations, even though they're not a pharmacist. So this is something we're actually working on at the moment. We recognise it's a really legitimate concern. So yes, it's something that we're hoping to get some answers on later this week or in the next week or two, just to see how we can protect those sensitive services, but still enable them to participate. So perhaps when we've clarified that, we can send a little update via NADA so that your members can know where we've landed on that. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great, Ange. I mean, I'm wondering too, given that there needs to be training and preparation and the expression of interest, perhaps we could encourage people to still put forward that expression of interest, still maybe undertake the training, keeping in mind that this other issue is being sort of worked through? Would you think that that might be a good approach?
I think that's yeah, I reckon that's a really good idea, because we're very committed to negotiating a solution to this. So we definitely still think it is worth those services applying. And yes, please have confidence that we're working hard on this, and we're hoping and expecting that we'll get some sort of solution to it.
That sounds great. Thanks, Ange. The other question that's come through is just around how long, or what's the sort of commitment around the training? Can you give us any sense of how long it might take in terms of that credentialing process?
Do you want to take this one, Liz?
Yeah, so the actual sort of training component, the presentation component, is about 90 minutes. And thereafter, there's the assessment and the credentialing part of it, which is the role play. Given that we've switched to an online model, we are thinking that it's going to be about 2 hours. So all up, we're thinking about 3.5 hours in total. That's an approximation based on the online training that's been delivered in LHDs and the experience of delivering the face-to-face model, which is similar. Yeah. So it's, I think if people set aside half a day, that should be sufficient.
Thanks, Liz. That sounds great. Are there any other questions from anybody who's dialed in? Given that we don't have any current open questions, what we might do is to really ensure that we're getting as much information out there to all of our NGO members and beyond. What's really useful is that we've got all of the New South Wales health information on our website, but please, as Liz and Ange have described, make sure that you go and visit the Your Room website, where there's lots of other information in relation to the Take Home Naloxone project. As we sort of wrap up at this point, are there any other things that you wanted to add?
I'd probably just say in closing that, you know, it's taken a number of years, I suppose, for states around Australia to be able to find ways of getting naloxone supply to happen more easily to the people who need it. And a lot of that delay has been about the fact that it is a pharmaceutical medication. There's restrictions on who can supply it. So the system that we've created, we've talked you through it today. We realise there's a few steps, a couple of letters of agreement, etc., that you'd need to sign as an organisation. But I guess we just want to underscore that we've tested the model on the government sector first. There have been a few kinks that needed to be ironed out, and a lot of those have been ironed out during the trial phases. So as much as possible, our priority is to make this a program that's actually doable for the non-government sector. So yeah, I just want to give you some confidence that this is a system that can work within an NGO, and I guess also we're really conscious that we need to be around to provide support. You know, for NGOs that haven't supplied a medication before, a Schedule 3 medication, we know that there will be some questions that come up about how that must be done or how best that can be done. So I guess we're considering that we'll be providing plenty of support during the startup phase. That's something we've needed to do in government sector, and we'll be around very much to do that for the NGO sector as well. So we very much encourage you to consider whether this is something you can do within your model.
And if I could just add to that, there's a list of FAQs that are also published on the New South Wales Health website, which might be helpful for resolving any of the questions that come up in in your mind, and also maybe to share with your co-workers who are potentially decision makers for participating in this program. So yeah, really encourage you to check out the page and the resources that are available there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ange, Liz and Nicola, for joining us, for sharing the information. We know you're there to support this process, as is NADA. And so just for everyone who's joined us today, we thank you for your time. And if there are any other questions or queries, we're always available. Go well, take good care of yourselves and each other, and we hope to see your expressions of interest coming through to the Ministry for this really important project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.